Firstly, this period under scrutiny for the Securities and Exchange Board of India in this Rajesh Exports Scam, it's a 4-year period that ends on the 31st of March 2025. That means it's taken them about a year and a half, the SEBI, to put out what is called an interim order. Mind you, this is just an interim order. This interim order can obviously be challenged. You haven't, and also you haven't. You are saying the other side, that is Rajesh Exports, did not cooperate. But they are saying no, we did cooperate. So there's a dispute about cooperation. So I think the investigation itself will still take some more time, and I will not be surprised if this investigation takes anywhere between 6 and 8 months longer. After that, what happens? The aggrieved party, in this case Rajesh Exports, can appeal. It can appeal to the SAT, that's the Securities Appellate Tribunal. It can also then, if it's unhappy with that, it can go up to the Supreme Court of India. So the entire process of the final adjudication could take 2 years or even longer. You never can say. Some cases have been going on in SEBI for decades, literally a decade and longer. This number is so huge that people are very astonished, because now they're saying 10% or 10.8% of this. What will happen to the people? But the money that belongs to the people. Same questions were asked, as Abir pointed out, in the LIC's investments in some of the Adani companies. Now, there are 2 points, the two other points, which I think need emphasis. What about the so-called independent directors? Rajesh Exports was a publicly listed company. There were supposed to be independent directors. What were they doing? Were they sleeping? Number two, what were the auditors doing? What were not just the internal auditors, what were the external auditors doing? You have names of two firms, chartered accountant firms, PV Ramana Reddy, PV Venkatri. What were they doing? Not only should they be absolutely penalized and disqualified by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, but I think they should be held for, if the allegations against Rajesh Exports are correct, they should be held responsible. They should also be prosecuted. That was the other point that I wanted to emphasize before I talk a little bit about the background and the history. And there are several other reports which I think Abir and we can pass on, which talks about the bigger issue of gold in India's economy and its importance. We are talking at a time when the Prime Minister said, stop buying gold, don't buy gold. I mean, I want to come back to that towards the end of my presentation. And before that, there's something which is one of the first major share market scandals in independent India involved the Life Insurance Corporation. That was the Haridas Mundra scandal. And if you will recall, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, his own son-in-law, had exposed this scandal in Parliament. And eventually there were two committees that were set up. They had public hearings. And eventually at the end of it all, the then Finance Minister, Pandit Nehru's right-hand man, T.T. Krishnamachari, put in his papers, not to mention a host of important officials in the Ministry of Finance and the LIC itself. Fast forward to Harshad Mehta, because Harshad Mehta scandal, again, they said something like this has ever happened before in the history of this country. I have a few personal anecdotes to tell you about Harshad Mehta if we have the time. At that time, when the Harshad Mehta scandal was really talked about, which was 1992, 91, 92, at 30,000 crore, it was supposed to be the biggest scandal of its kind, the biggest financial scandal of its kind, 30,000 crores. We are here today talking about 15 lakh crores. After 15, you have 5 zeros followed by 7 zeros. Now, at that time, that was the biggest scandal. And what happened was, what was common between today, that is Rajesh Exports, LIC of Harshad Mehta, not LIC of Haridas Mundra, one HM and another HM. And that was something to manipulate stocks. One of those forms is thin and circular trading. How does that happen? Say Rajesh Exports controls company A that buys a particular stock at, say, 100 rupees. Rajesh Exports also controls indirectly company B that then buys the stock at 105 rupees, which in turn sends it back to company C, also controlled by Rajesh Export, at 115. And so you artificially jack up the price. You have a thin and circular trading. Now, this is something that you find common throughout, from Haridas Mundra to Harshad Mehta and subsequently Ketan Parekh and other such scandals, including the misrepresentation of accounts, very, very recent cases of Gensol, Bharat Global Developers, and Jane Street. The one common factor that you see running right through is who suffers? The ordinary investor. The ordinary investor had suffered then and suffered now, and it was based on a complaint by an investor that resulted in this investigation in the first place. Now, in the case of the Harshad Mehta scandal and in the Ketan Mehta scandal, on both cases, the 9 years separated the two stock market scandals. The government, different governments, one was a Congress government, the other was a BJP government, BJP-led government, coalition government. They appointed JPCs, Joint Parliamentary Committees. They came out with voluminous reports. They had extensive hearings. They heard everybody, and much of these proceedings were like, I mean, the media would be briefed. There was a certain amount of transparency in it, and the two common things that we find between the Harshad Mehta scandal and the Ketan Parekh scandal. Yes, Ketan Parekh used to be working with Harshad Mehta, but they were all lauded by the media. There was a cover story in a magazine, Business Today magazine, where he was called Raging Bull. That's Harshad Mehta. And the same thing. I mean, they were held up as almost as role models. They were there with their fancy cars and their fancy houses showing off. But several good things happened as a result of that JPC. Firstly, SEBI was empowered. There was a series of reports that came out that were at that time authored by the first chairman of the Securities and Exchange Board of India, the late G.V. Ramakrishna, exchange of letters between the then Finance Secretary Montek Singh Ahluwalia and this scandal. And there was detailed arguments and I would say verbal fights between Mr. Ramakrishna and Mr. Ahluwalia to say, look, you have to do something about it. The Bombay Stock Exchange is like a closed club. The Bombay Stock Exchange were taken by. The point I was trying to make is there was some good that came out of these scandals. Yes, Harshad Mehta died at the age of 47 when everybody was partying on 31st of December 2001. At the age of 47, he died after a 9-year trial. I met him once. I used to do a lot of television interviews, and he came to my studio. This is a little anecdote. I'm sharing a personal anecdote. And I said, he said, you cannot ask me certain questions. So I said, no, Harshad bhai, you cannot deny me that right. You have the right not to answer my question. You cannot deny me the right to ask you questions. Eventually, that interview never happened. But when you look ahead, 9 years after that, you had an almost similar scandal. This time involving another high-flying stockbroker who worked with Harshad Mehta. His name was Ketan Parekh. He was convicted in 2008. There were the K10 stocks which he manipulated. That includes Z Telefilm, that includes Adani. These were some of Adani Exports. These were some of the things. And even after he was convicted, even after he came out, again, SEBI had to ban Ketan Parekh in 2025. After he was convicted by a special court in Bombay. And he was subject to 2 years of imprisonment, rigorous imprisonment. So that tells you a lot about what is going wrong with our regulatory system, what has gone wrong with the way the SEBI works. If it's happening over and over again. And more recently, as I mentioned, you have had all these scandals which are continuing, and this is the biggest of them all. Finally, what will happen? I don't know. I want to conclude by making a few general observations. India is the biggest importer of gold and the biggest consumer of gold. Pranab Mukherjee, the then finance minister, and several others saying we are crazy about gold. India has the world's biggest gold stocks, though we hardly produce any gold. Most of the gold is produced in countries like South Africa. But where are these? Where is this gold? This gold is not all there in the vaults of the Reserve Bank of India. There was a little bit of a controversy recently about whether Reserve Bank of India, what it had done with its gold stocks. It was denied and things. But there was a big issue when Chandrasekhar was the prime minister and Yashwant Sinha was the finance minister about India actually physically transporting its gold to the United Kingdom and mortgaging it to tide over its foreign exchange crisis. And then after Mr. Narasimha Rao became the prime minister and Dr. Manmohan Singh became the finance minister, the gold came back. But the point is, the biggest stocks of gold in India are not in the vaults of the Reserve Bank of India or even with jewelers. They are with temples. They are with temple trusts, including trusts like the one in Tirupati. The second point is we have to understand that gold, there is a sonar, a goldsmith in virtually every village in this country, because Indians are obsessed with gold. So when Mr. Narendra Modi tells you don't buy gold, it's supposed to strike an emotional chord. Now, Abir, if you can forward that link, there was a very detailed report on the gold economy that came out by the Niti Aayog some years ago. It was put together by the then secretary of the Niti Aayog, Ratan Wattal, which talks about several of these aspects. The other thing, and I'm sure Abir can elaborate on this, gold has been the transactions in the gold and the way the government has been changing its rules and changing its laws and changing its rules regarding gold is amazing. There was an 80-20 scheme where you were supposed to add 20% value and then export it. It became a huge scandal. It was started during the second UPA regime when Mr. Chidambaram was the finance minister. It continued into the Narendra Modi regime. And thereafter, there was an expose by the Controller and Auditor General of India. And all the big names were involved, including not just Rajesh Exports, but Reliance Industries, by Adani Exports. And you also see the same story. Adani Exports was involved with... was involved in, Abir has shared that report. Adani Exports was involved with Rajesh Exports. There was a show cause notice issued by the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence saying how they had misused these various schemes. Right now, we are talking about how unrelated schemes like the production link incentive scheme was allegedly misused by Rajesh Export. You see how these gold schemes, how quickly they change and how all the big names, and sad to stay, it's not just the private sector. It's not just the private sector, the Adanis and the Ambanis and the Rajesh Exports of the world. Public sector banks have been involved. You talked about Canara Bank. There are several other public sector banks and institutions who've all been involved in, what should I say, different kinds of racketeering. And I use this word racketeering. I'm not alone. The Controller and Auditor General of India has used this language. So I think it's about time we need to take a very comprehensive look at this sector and this, whether it'll happen or not, I don't know. But this Rajesh Exports case should become a wake-up call to clean up the system. There are pictures doing the rounds of the social media which shows this person, Rajesh Mehta, with a much younger Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. Nobody has as yet denied that these pictures were whatever, fake or something. So the issue of political patronage needs to be, I mean, we have to consider it. At the same time, it is this political patronage which may not lead to a more deeper and a more meaningful probe into Rajesh Exports and its alleged shenanigans and its financial misrepresentation and all these cases. Let me come straight. There are some things which are common everywhere. The use of shell companies, the use of dummy entities, having very complex corporate structures, going to tax havens, including to Switzerland, essentially to avoid and evade payment of tax. Sometimes that dividing line is very thin between tax avoidance and tax evasion. But I think there's more to it. I mean, in the Harshad Mehta case, there was cases of pure forgery. He was forging bank receipts. Now, if a truly meaningful inquiry has to take place, SEBI should voluntarily solicit the cooperation of the Enforcement Directorate, the Directorate of Enforcement in the Ministry of Finance. The ED goes after all the political opponents of the government to check whether Rajesh Exports, whether it has violated the Prevention of Money Laundering Act and the Foreign Exchange Management Act. Whether the ED will be asked to do this or not is a separate question. I think the income tax department has to come in. If you actually misrepresented your accounts and inflated it, then the income tax department comes into the picture. Then would come the bigger issues of conspiracy, where the Central Bureau of Investigation could come in. The short point is, you had a joint parliamentary committee in the case of the Harshad Mehta scandal. You had a joint parliamentary committee in the case of the Ketan Parekh scandal. Are we going to move in that direction to restore the credibility? The same government, we've had, as I mentioned to you, series of cases of this kind, misrepresentation of account, Gensol, Bharat Global Developers, Jane Street, and people have been talking about it, Sucheta Dalal included. But you've done nothing. So the question is, will you do something? And I think maybe this is also presents to us an opportunity to look at the bigger picture of the gold economy and its importance in India, and what can be done about it. Maybe Abir, if you can fill in a little bit about this whole why this 80-20 scheme became a scandal, where the biggest names were involved, as I mentioned, Reliance and Adani and Rajesh Exports. What happened exactly? Why was the Controller and Auditor General so upset or put out such a scathing critical report? Let's move on. If indeed Indians are obsessed with gold and you can do nothing about gold, you not just store it in your temples, you store it under your pillow, you have to give it for weddings. And you also eat it, in case you didn't know, you have gold leaf, and gold is also eaten in this country. And gold is supposedly the best hedge against inflation. But the obsession with gold, can we channelize it in a way in which it leads to jobs? I mean, if you are indeed obsessed with gold, I mean, why should the world's biggest refiner of gold be based out of Switzerland when the biggest consumer of gold, which is being refined, is here in India? Why? Is it because the Swiss entities offer you, opacity, as he has been quoted, as Mr. Rajesh Mehta has been quoted, that I'm not going to answer this question because as per the Swiss laws, I do not need to disclose the several bits of information that could lead to this entire scandal. I mean, the law enforcing agency is getting deeper into the scandal. So I think we should look at this scandal to clean up the system. That's an ideal situation. Whether it will or not, I don't know. As I told you, the whole processes are time consuming, and I'm at the risk of repeating myself. This investigation alone may take 6 to 8 months. And then the entire adjudication process could take years and years and years, at least 2 years, most people believe. Therefore, I think this is quite important. Okay, now Ibn Abraham Kurian has asked me to give this link. See what had happened in 2007, the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, which is the customs intelligence wing of the Ministry of Finance, after conducting raids on various companies, it issued a show cause notice, which is a very detailed show cause notice. You can get to read the entire show cause notice. I have put up a link on my own website, paranjoy.in, and you can go under Adani files and see it. There were two show cause notices which dealt with how cut and polished diamonds, and cut and polished diamonds was used to stud gold jewelry, and that's where the gold comes in. And among the companies that were working hand in glove together was Rajesh Exports and Adani Exports. These were the allegations that were leveled in that show cause notice. It's a detailed show cause notice running into a few hundred pages. And about 8 years later, in October 2015, the Supreme Court ruled, and its ruling was very critical against the six companies in the Adani group, and they were not the only companies. There were various other companies that were also involved. And for your information, Mr. Adani is no longer in the business of cut and polished diamonds and studded gold jewelry. But all I can say is Mr. Jatin Mehta, who is related by marriage to his older brother, Vinod Adani, is currently an absconder. And he is being accused of several scandalous actions. And all you need to do is do Jatin Mehta, Google it, and you'll get many, many reports about him. So it's not just Vijay Mallya and Lalit Modi and and Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi who are all absconders or who are not in this country at present. But Mr. Jatin Mehta is also there. Anirban, too many Mehtas, you are saying. Are you suggesting that people from a particular community are involved? No, no, no. I would never say that. There are Mehtas and Mehtas. And there are some very good Mehtas. Zubin Mehta and my late editor, Vinod Mehta, to name only two.